Hello, check, check, 1, 2, 1, 2. Can everybody see me and hear me okay? Just give me a thumbs up or go ahead and type in the chat, or you can hop on the mic. Thank you, guys. Okay. Yeah, so it is on the hour. It is 11 Eastern. Let's get started. Excited about this. So give you a little taste of what you will get in my course if you decide to join me starting next week. And yeah, so I'm curious about how much you guys have dealt with the GMAT already, how much you've studied for it, how much you prepped for it, if it's brand new, like no, nothing. So let's just see that in the chat. Go ahead. And if you want to private chat me, you can do that as well. But yeah, let me know where you are in your GMAT journey. All right, Sania says brand new, just began last week. Okay. Preparing in the middle. Studying for over a year, Maxie says. Wow, 2 to 3 hours every day, pretty good. Just starting this week, Darlene says. Some people have been through the TTP course, that's great. Getting towards the end, this Leaky says, yep. Wisdom says starting too, okay, great. So I got a little bit of a mixed bag here, that's all right, but I'm gonna try to have a little something for everybody. Starting with the quant, we're going to do some percent word problem stuff. And also, I'd like to kind of get a gauge of how you guys feel about that topic. So have you dealt with percent word problems before? And if so, how do you feel about it? And Sue, and yes, there is going to be a recording. It's going to go up on YouTube. Darlene says not since high school. Yep. And that's the case with a lot of the quant stuff that shows up on the test. I get that a lot. People saying, hey, I haven't really looked at this kind of stuff since high school or secondary school. A lot of challenges. Yep. And what I like to do is kind of demystify it a little bit and tell you kind of my approach to percent word problems in general. It gives you a taste of what you would get in the percent word problems lesson in my class. All right. And I'll do my best to kind of keep everybody in line. So I've got a lot of material to get through. So let's actually just get started. And I kind of want to look at a problem together to start with and outline kind of how they like to ask questions. Because a lot of times when it deals with percent questions, it's not as much about heavy math, but it's about outlining all the information you have, getting all your ducks in a row, and making sure you keep track of it adequately. So let's actually look at this kind of question together. We've got this restaurant, right? It says on Saturday at a certain restaurant, the number of food orders increased by 10 orders each hour after the restaurant opened at 9 a.m. And at 3 p.m., the restaurant had 30% more orders than it had at 9 a.m. And I want to know specifically how many food orders were placed at 5 p.m. And one of the things you notice right away is they kind of get you with what I call QPOT, which is question part of the question. It's kind of a reminder that you got to remember what you're looking for in the first place. I want to know how many food orders were placed at 5 p.m. So not only do I have to think about this 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. business, I've also got to think once I've done that about 5 p.m. And that's how they get you, not necessarily with hard calculations, but by keeping track of a lot of information, making sure you don't miss any crucial details. But one thing you can do on a problem like this is outline it, go step by step, even if it's just kind of listing things out visually and saying, I'm going from 9 a.m. and I know I'm going to 3 p.m. So I just get this out on the page to keep track of it. And what happens? I know that I have 30% more orders. Okay, but I also know that it's going up by exactly 10 orders each hour. So I can do something as simple as kind of outlining each step in the process. I know I go 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., then to 11 a.m., then to noon, 12 p.m., and I got 1 p.m., and I got 2 p.m. Now, this might seem like a lot of work, but you'll be surprised how much it pays off in terms of understanding the information. Because I know over the course of each one of these 1 hour periods, I'm going to bump up the number of orders by 10, plus 10, plus 10, plus 10, and plus 10. Da, da, da. And so now what I'd like to do is turn it over to you guys and kind of get an idea of where I could go from here. Any ideas? And I'm not asking you to solve the entire problem at once. I'm just saying what's next. So Uza's got one idea. And yeah, Akash? Yeah, if you raise your hand, feel free to hop on the mic.
So, hi. So we can go ahead and like split the question in two parts. For example, there are 6 parts. Like each part will be like approximately 5% increase. 5% increase means 10 orders. So we can end up at a total of 200 at the start at 9 a.m.
Okay, so kind of jumping ahead, doing multiple steps at once, which is great. And you don't have to do this right away, but what Akash is getting at is kind of an intuitive approach here. Now, some people are saying add up the values. And yeah, we've got these 6 sections. So we know that there are 6 hours. Each corresponds to a 10 increase. So we have a total increase of 60 orders. All right. And yeah, if we're going to set up an equation, one thing I see some people coming up with equations right off the bat, right? So I add 6 periods of 10, but I also know that at the beginning, what I can do if I do this kind of an algebraic approach. So at the very beginning, I could say that I have X orders. And I also know that at 3 p.m., it's going to be what? It's going to be X plus 60. But I also know that that represents a 30% increase. So what I can do is say I've got my original X, and I'm going to add 30% of that number. So 0.3X for the percents, and that's going to get me to X plus 60. So what I've done is I've actually condensed everything to match the information that I have. I'm going to go up by 30%, and I know that that's an increase of 60. Well, what does that mean for me? Well, the X's, you notice, actually drop out. I can actually subtract X from both sides, which makes sense because what I've really just figured out is that 30% increase is represented by exactly 60 orders. And then you can just solve this as you would any other algebraic expression. You would say, okay, well, let's multiply both sides by 10. That's what I would do because I like to get rid of decimals. So I turn this into 3.0x, I'll call it that. And over here, I multiply by 10 and I get 600. And now I'm just one step away. I just need to divide by 3 to get to 200. And I'm done. And I know that that is going to be my final answer, right? Oh, I see some dissent. Kind of paused and gave you guys a purposeful kind of lead in the wrong direction, right? Why? Why am I not done? I get X equals 200. This is how they get you, right? That's what I wanted to introduce you guys to. They don't get you necessarily with fancy calculations. It's not too bad to do this part. But what have I got here? This is 200 orders at 9 a.m., which means that I've got to rethink things because I want what happens at 5 p.m. No problem, though, because I know that at 3 p.m., how many orders do I have? Well, I started at 200. So what's actually going to happen now is I end up at 3 p.m. with 260. And I'm almost there, right? Because what happens from 3 p.m.? Well, I got 260 at 3 p.m. And I'm going to continue another couple hours, right? Not too bad because it's going to be at the same increase. I'm going to increase by 10 each time. So I just need to do this a couple times more. And I have my actual final answer, which is going to be 280. And I never want to forget about what I talked about right up here, this idea of Q pot Q. Pretty powerful concept. Always come back to exactly what you're trying to answer the question for. Good. All right, so that's kind of a basic outline of what to do with a percent word problem. You can make it very visual, right? You don't have to necessarily think about it just algebraically. And let's take a look at another example. And how do they make this tough? Word problems, right? They actually throw a lot of details at you, and it's up to you to figure out how to sift through them. So let's take a look at this one together again. It says, at a certain school, I've got 60% of students are female, all right? So first bit of crucial information. And because the school's graduating class is so large, I know 20% of the school's female students and 30% of the school's male students will be leaving after graduation. And only the graduating students are leaving the school and no new students enter. So the ultimate question here, my Q-pot-Q, is going to be, what percent of the entire student population will be leaving the school upon graduation? Okay, so again, let's not solve the entire problem all at once, because I think what happens is, you read this and you kind of freeze up because there's so much thrown at you, right? What I like to do is take one step at a time, break it down into smaller problems, and just say, let's find one thing we can attack. The first thing of which is it says that there's 60% of the students are female. So what's a strategy I can use there to outline? I mean, if I know 60% is female, what else do I know? Okay, Vasiliki has one idea. Do we agree, disagree? Different idea? So Mark agrees, EK agrees. Sir Ram, yep. So it seems like we're in agreement. And yeah, the whole idea is if I have just males and females in the class, right? And that's all I'm talking about in this particular instance. I know that what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, well, I've got 60% of students who are female, which means that 40% are male. Okay. Kasha's got one idea here, right? Nice. And if you could do this pretty quickly, great. That's what you want to do on the test. But if you're just starting out, don't worry about it. This will become a lot clearer when we do the class. But it says 20% of the school's female students. Now, one thing you can do in some situations is you can use some hard numbers to actually make it a little bit more concrete, because percentages can sometimes be difficult to keep track of. But you notice that the answer has to be the same no matter what the total number of students is. All right, because the answer choices can't change. So I might as well pick an easy number that's going to help me keep track of everything. And yeah, some people are saying, why don't I just pick 100? Pretend it is 100 total students. Well, that makes things a lot easier. If I have 100 total students, I'm talking about exactly 60 females and 40 males. Okay, now 20% of the school's female students are going to be leaving after graduation. So what do I need to do now with that 60 females? And I can think of 20% in a few different ways. So Mark is saying divide by 5. 20% is 1/5 of 100. So I could just go ahead and divide it by 5, right? Any other way? Keep typing, but I want to get into what Mark was just talking about, which is that 20% is the same thing as 1/5. So I might as well just say, oh, well, 60 divided by 5 equals 12, right? So 12 females are going to leave after graduation. Yeah, now Wisdom's got one idea. Sometimes you can simplify it even further and say 6 females and 4 males. Do it in terms of 10 total students. The reason why that's not going to be as helpful here is because if I have 6 females, what's the problem? Anybody know what this is? Why can I not do 6 in this particular case? What's going to be the problem with 6 females? Yeah, the problem is I have to divide by 5 for that 20%, and 6 is not divisible by 5. Yeah, fractional people, exactly. And when we're dealing with a real world situation like this, when we've got numbers of people, numbers of basketballs, number of cars, anything like that, we're going to be dealing only in whole numbers. So we want to pick something that's going to give us those whole numbers. So I know I have 12 females that are going to leave, but then I do the exact same thing with the males. It says 30% of the school's male students. It's up to me to intuit that I'm talking about 40 males. So I have to take 30% of that. And how do I do 30% relatively quickly? Three-tenths. Sure, I'm kind of giving us the fractional approach. You can multiply it by 3/10. 10% times 3, Nick says. Yeah, this is one of my favorite ways to do it, is frame everything in terms of an easy percentage you already know. I know that 10% is specifically for males, right? Because it's 1/10 of 40. That's easy to think about. So to get to 30%, I just need to multiply by 3. Not bad, right? Could have done the same thing for 20% too, depending how you look at it. I had 60 females, right? So I know 10% is 6, which means that 20% is going to be double that. I like Selmark's trick too. If you check that out, divide the number by 10, multiply it by the total percent. And we're going to be talking about these little tricks that you can use mathematically just to make calculations quicker and more accurate when we do the class. So what's the final piece of the puzzle here? Okay, well, the question part of the question, Q pot Q, says what percent of the entire student population will be leaving the school upon graduation? So what's our final answer here if we look at the numbers that we have? So we got a lot of people for 24. And for those of you who didn't see this, why is that? Well, it's very easy to forget that percent is just going to be the number I'm interested in, right? So in this case, the number of females, or sorry, the entire population that's going to be leaving over the total, and I just have to multiply that by 100%. But I already know that the number leaving the school is 24. I've got 12 females and 12 males. So this is just going to be 24 over 100 for the 100 total people. And no mystery as to what's going to happen if I multiply that by 100. Denominator and numerator cancel out. And I'm quite simply left with 24%. Good. So any questions thus far about these problems or anything else related to percent word problems? All right. So I think we have time for one more of these bad boys. Let's take a look and see what we're going to do. Want to pick one that's going to be good for us. Yeah, okay, let's do this last one. Yeah, let's actually talk about this one really quick, because they can get you sometimes by kind of playing into your biases. Something that you might say and think is the case, you know, just if you take a cursory look at it, you don't examine it too closely. Because check out this one. If it says the price of a certain stock, it's fallen by 50%, right? By what percent must the stock's price increase to return to the original price? I see some people are onto this right away, right? But if you're not thinking and you're not careful, what answer choice is there to kind of trap you? Yeah, the classic trap here is just to say, oh, I went down by 50%. I guess I have to go up by 50% again to get back to the original. But that's not actually the case. And again, I'm very visual. I like to, you know, get it out on the page visually to show you what's going on here, because if I go down, for example, from 100 and it falls by 50%, it's going to go down to 50. Okay, but if I go back the opposite direction, I've changed the original number. The starting point is going to be 50. So what did I just do? Well, I increased by exactly 50, but I've got to frame that 50 in terms of the original number. So if I do that and I think about it, well, what percent of 50 is 50? 50 is 50 itself. So 50% of 50 is, or what percent of 50 is 50? So we've got, yeah, it's itself, right? So I'm talking about a 100% increase. 50 is 100% of 50. And I like what some people were saying in the chat. There's another trap here. So we talked about answer choice A. That's a trap. But also E, because what am I doing? I'm going from 50 to 100. So I am doubling the number, going from 50 to 100. And that doubling, in other words, multiplying by 2, can sucker you into thinking that 200% is the right answer. The problem is, well, it's accurate to say that 100 is 200% of 50, right? But of, percent of the original number, not the same as percent increase. The 100% applies to the increase. Yep. Good call. All right. Cool. So I think we have time for one more of these, and I want to give you guys a chance to do one of them on your own before we switch gears and go to critical reasoning. And that is this one. So take a little bit of time to do this one on your own. I'm curious to see what you guys come up with. And if you could please, if you get the answer, don't do it publicly, send it to me privately, just so we keep it private and nobody else sees the answer. Good luck with it. We'll be back. Okay, let's come back. I like what I'm seeing in the chat for the most part. A lot of you confirming what the correct answer is, and it is indeed going to be 200. So how do we get to that point? Okay, well, the interesting thing here is that we have kind of a difference in percentages. I know that it's actually going to be marked up 20%, and it should have been marked down 10%. And as a result, the difference in prices between those two is 60. So the question is, how can I actually outline this? I could do it straight up algebraically, which I'm sure some of you did. I can also do it a little bit more intuitively. So I'll let you guys kind of open up here on the public chat. How did you do it? Abrar says algebra. All right. And even for the people that get good with algebra, I recommend kind of practicing this alternative approach that we're going to talk about, doing it a little bit more intuitively. So if I do it algebraically, I know I start with, let's say, the price of an item. And I like to assign variables such that I can actually remember what they are. So I'll call it P for price. And I'm going to increase that by 20% of the price. Okay. And that is 1.2p because I basically got 1p plus 0.2p, so I get 1.2p. But I know it should have been marked down by 10%. Now the trick here is if I mark something down by 10%, that is the same as multiplying it by 0.90, which makes sense when you think about it. Again, if you do this visually, and I said I start with 100, and if I decrease by 10%, it's the exact same thing as multiplying by 0.9. So what does that mean for me? Okay, well, it should have been marked down by 10%. So it should have been at 0.9p. So kind of go down here, right? And that means I can just subtract these, right? The difference between them is 60. Because I know the price ended up $60 higher than it should have been. So I subtract 1.2p and 0.9p. That gives me 0.3p. And I know that that is equal to 60. And for me personally at this point, I'm like, let's clean this up. Forget about the decimals, right? I'm going to move the decimal place over 1, which is the same as multiplying by 10. This is much easier to think about. 3p equals 600. So I know that my original price is going to have to be 200. Now, there is a conceptual shortcut here, and I'm curious as to whether ever anybody else found this. So can we kind of think about that difference in percentage right away, rather than doing it entirely algebraically? Anybody do it kind of a more non-algebraic intuitive way? All right, so this was the algebra. And yeah, so Neil's onto something here because Neil says, let's just cut to the heart of this and look at the percent difference. The percentages are in terms of the same number, the original price, right? So what I'm looking at, the more intuitive approach, is to say, okay, well, it's a 30% difference, right? Going from 20 and 10, right? It's 20 up when it should be 10 down. It's a 30% difference. And what does that correspond to? Exactly $60. And what do we notice if we look at that? 30% difference corresponds to $60 of the, and 30% difference between the original price. Well, one way to look at it is 60 is twice 30. 30 times 2 is 60, right? So that 30% corresponds to 60, which means that if I go to 100% and kind of do the same thing, what is the original price? I know I take the percentage and I double it to get the dollar amount. That's another way to kind of cut right to the heart of this and say that the answer is 200. Pretty wild, right? And that's the kind of thing I would recommend you practice. And we'll talk more about that in the percent word problems lesson when we get to it. But I like to, in my classes, kind of show you little ways around kind of doing the hardcore algebra. It doesn't mean you'll never use the algebra, but there are ways to do it a little bit more intuitively. Okay, good. So I think that's a good place to move on. Now we're going to switch gears. We're going to go to some critical reasoning weekend questions. And yeah, as far as difficulty level goes, this one, probably easy to medium. Okay, so we're going to critical reasoning next, and we're going to do weekend questions. And again, I'll open up to you guys and say, okay, well, how much have you done with critical reasoning questions in general, or specifically weekend questions? Is it brand new? Do you struggle with it? Are you good at it? Pretty comfortable, Abrar says, all right. Some people are saying privately, it's like, I struggle a little bit. All right, well, let's try to demystify it a little bit. And we're going to go through, as we did before, kind of an example question. Okay. Somewhat struggling. All right. So what you're going to do on a critical reasoning question in general is you're going to get an argument of some type or a series of statements. And then the question follows. And you say, okay, well, what exactly am I supposed to do with this argument? Now, in this particular case, let's take a quick look at the question first. I mean, different people have different opinions as to whether you should look at the question first. I say, personally, it's an okay idea because it kind of frames what you're supposed to do with the argument in the first place. And yeah, so just to clarify, there's going to be a recording. It's going to go up on YouTube. So not to worry, you will have access to this session. It'll be public. Now, the question, part of the question, says most seriously undermine the support for the above conclusion, which clearly indicates to us that we're trying to weaken this argument. But one of the first things you want to do when you look at an argument, I mean, people ask me, should I take notes? Should I not take notes? To what extent should I take notes? But you don't have to be too extensive. I like to read it through a first time and kind of digest the argument and then go back and take notes on all the important parts. And it says we're trying to weaken support for the above conclusion. Okay, now for those of you who've seen this kind of thing before, how do we define a conclusion? A conclusion, you know, how do we characterize it? It could be that you get a key word like thus or therefore. In this particular case, we have that, right? At the end of the first line, it says therefore, so it's pretty clear we're going to get to the conclusion. But even if you don't have that kind of language, so who says the author's main point? Neil says the author's opinion. That's how we want to think about a conclusion. It's kind of like a judgment call or an opinion, as opposed to a premise, right? A premise is going to be more like a statement of fact. Something that isn't an opinion of any kind. It's just something the author's stating and saying, okay, here's the case, right? We don't really care whether the fact is true or not, which is hard to get used to, right? We just care what role it plays. So we're going through here and it says, okay, deforestation in Peru has caused the number of jaguars living there to decline precipitously. That's a fact. It's just stated as a fact. And it says most of the deforestation that occurs in Peru is done illegally. Okay, also stated as a fact. Therefore, all right, so now we're getting to the conclusion. By increasing the severity of the punishment for engaging in illegal deforestation in Peru, we can stop the decline in the number of jaguars living there. And this fits the mold of what I like to call personally a plan goal question, because we've got a goal we're trying to achieve, something we're trying to finalize, and we've got a plan to do it. And the goal can kind of act like the conclusion here. So what's the conclusion here, or what is the goal? I can label it as such, right? The goal is what? What's my goal here? What am I trying to accomplish? So Mark's got one idea. Do we agree, disagree? Neil agrees. Yeah, right. And it says at the very end, we can stop the decline in the number of jaguars living there. Okay, so stop decline in number of jaguars. And you can use abbreviations or shorthand, however you like. But you notice that I'm only taking notes after reading it through a little bit, digesting it and saying, oh, now I go after the goal. And what's the plan to do it? Our premise, a statement of fact, or in this case, a plan, is to do what exactly? What's my plan to do it? Sean has got this, right? Increasing the severity of the punishment, right? So increase, and some people like to do this kind of thing. Like if it says increase, again, you can be very visual. I can put a little up arrow here, increase severity of punishment, okay, for illegal deforestation, right? Again, using shorthand wherever you need to. Now, I'm trying to weaken this idea. And when I think about this ahead of time, right? I mean, you don't want to get too specific. When we pre-phrase or we pre-think what the answer could be, we don't want to actually come up with an exact answer choice. We want to get very broad here. Now, what a weakener would do, very basically, is say something that, okay, I do this plan, you know, increase severity of the punishment. So I do the plan, but maybe I don't stop jaguar decline. Notice that I just went in the opposite direction, right? I didn't get more specific than that. It's going to make me question that I'm going to achieve this goal simply by enacting this particular plan. And what I'd like to do now with that in mind is open you guys up to the answers and tell me what you think is going to be the winner here. And again, do it privately. Go ahead now. Okay, we all seem to be in agreement in the private chat thus far. Yeah, nice. Okay, so I got a bunch of people answering now, and we are kind of coalescing around answer choice C, which is definitely going to be our winner here. Why? Okay, now we're getting into the specifics, right? Well, we did this weakener at the bottom right, we didn't get specific. But now we look at C, it says almost all the deforestation, the stuff that's occurring illegally that we talked about, right, occurs in remote regions where almost no law enforcement is present. Now, that makes us question that the plan is going to achieve the goal, because the plan is to increase the severity of punishment for illegal deforestation. Well, if there's no law enforcement present, that means less likely to be punished, right? So it makes us question that this plan is necessarily going to lead to a decline in jaguars. Now, the important thing to realize is it doesn't necessarily prove anything. That's not the point. It doesn't have to completely disqualify an argument. It just has to make you put it into question. But what about some of these other answer choices? Because I think it's fun to talk about wrong answers. You guys should study wrong answers as much as you do correct ones, because you'll get familiar with the patterns they like to use as far as how they try to dupe you. Like if we go through these kind of one by one, we're looking at answer choice A. Okay, deforestation often leads to a decline in the presence of the main sources of food upon which jaguars depend. Okay, so why not that one? Vishal's saying it's an explanation. Yeah, and you want to be on the lookout for stuff that just simply explains what we already know. We already know that deforestation is a problem for jaguars. Okay, but this just kind of tells us how it happens. It just confirms that deforestation is a problem, and the reason why is because of the food drainage. Yeah, and as somebody else is saying, it has nothing to do with the plan, right? It's just confirming what we already know and just explaining why. Okay, and B, same kind of thing here, right? It says jaguar populations have declined rapidly in other countries. Now, I'm not a big fan of using the term out of scope. A lot of people like to use this. Because when we're dealing with a weakened or strengthened or assumption question, anything like that, everything's going to be out of scope because you're always going to get new information. The better question to ask is it relevant or irrelevant? What's happening in other countries is irrelevant to this particular argument because it doesn't tell me anything about this plan in this place and whether it'll achieve this specific goal. All right. Same kind of thing with answer choice D. Happens in Bolivia. We're talking about illegal drug trafficking. Okay, well, great, but irrelevant. And E, okay, it's great. So numerous conservation groups are currently working in Peru. Sounds great, but a problem is it deals nothing about the plan to goal relationship. All right, so questions about that? And yeah, I would say that, D, I mean, it seems like it's on its way to being a strengthener, if anything, as Vishal says, but it really isn't because it deals with an entirely new country and an entirely new topic. It's not even about preserving the jaguars now. It's about severity of penalties with illegal drug trafficking. Well, how do I know that that situation is applicable to the jaguars? Nice. Good call. All right, so I'd like you guys to take all that into account and try to apply this process we just talked about on the next question. It'll be a little bumpy if you're not used to it. I don't expect you to get it right away, but this is a taste of what you'll get in the weekend lesson when we do it. Much more about this in the class. Okay, so here's the question I want you guys to kind of do on your own, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. Good luck. Okay, let's talk about this. So I'd like everybody to get in a vote, even if you're not sure. The worst that could happen is you get it wrong. But like I'll say in class, you don't have to impress me. You have to impress the test. So let's come back in 5 seconds, in 4, in 3, in 2, 1. All right, and let's see what answers we have here. So looks like for the most part, we got the correct answer on this one. Okay, and I also want to account for answer choices that you guys chose that weren't correct, but that's okay, right? Some people went with C, some people went with D, and some people went with E. So it looks like we're split among those three. Nobody chose the other two, which is great. So what do we got going on here? Well, we talked about this whole idea of a plan and a goal, right? Thinking about a conclusion, like a judgment call as a plan. I say some people are starting to break this down nicely, right? But what was the conclusion? which in this case takes the form of a goal. It is to combat global warming, right? And what do? The plan here is to add powdered olivine rock, do abbreviations, to oceans. Now, sometimes what you want to do is off to the side, this is how I like to do it, is to say why the author thinks that. So we've got this plan and we've got this goal, right? And why does the author think that that's going to be effective? What piece of evidence does the author use? And the basic gist I'm getting at here, yeah, so some people are saying privately now. The basic gist here, why does the author think this? By presenting a fact, yep, and the fact is that the powdered olivine rock removes, whoops, let's spell that correctly, removes CO2. Okay, and that also factors into the goal here because I combat global warming. And what is this all about? I have to notice that the goal here is to reduce CO2 in the atmosphere. Okay, so I look at that and I say, my plan is to put this powdered olivine rock, remove the CO2. I know it does remove CO2. I don't question that. That's given to me as a fact. But is that necessarily going to reduce CO2 in the atmosphere overall? And again, you can turn this on its head and say, well, a weakener is going to make me think that, sure, I do this. I add the powdered olivine rock to ocean. And again, nothing definitive. I like to say maybe atmospheric CO2 does not decrease. Okay, and with all that in mind, we can take a look at our answer choices and think about it now. Okay, so answer choice C says technology that could be used for mining and powdering olivine rock has been available for many years. So it's been available for many years. And as some people are saying in the chat now, the problem is that doesn't address this specific plan. It could have been that the technology has been available for years, right? But that just means it's been available. I don't know how it's been used, not used, to what extent. And the problem is it doesn't affect the plan to goal relationship. Will the powdered olivine rock in the ocean lead to reduced CO2 in the atmosphere? Knowing how long the technology has been used doesn't really tell me anything about that. Okay, answer choice D, another popular one. So it says there are minerals such as peridotite that could be used for absorbing atmospheric carbon dioxide without mining or powdering. And I saw some people giving a good response as to why this is problematic. Why? Feel free to type it publicly now. It's irrelevant. It doesn't deal with the plan. Aha, but I like what Neil is saying and a few other people. Sure, Ram is saying this too. Yeah, all D says is that there might be a better option. Okay, so we could do peridotite, and that would be without mining or powdering. But the problem is, even if there's a better option, that doesn't tell me about the likelihood that this plan will work. It's very tempting to go with something like D, right? But the problem is like, even if there's a better option, the added olivine rock could still work. And I'm just trying to question the likelihood that it'll work. Knowing that there's a better option out there doesn't really do anything for me. Okay, and that's kind of what I would look at with answer choice A too. Nobody chose A. So it can be dramatically reduced via changing methods of producing food. That just tells me that there's another way to do it. It doesn't tell me that this particular plan is going to work. B, I'm glad nobody chose that one. That's tempting, right? So I know atmospheric carbon dioxide levels have continued to increase, and that can lead you into a false sense of security because it's saying, oh, well, it's increasing, so this plan might not work. But no, it just says that CO2 has increased overall, but that doesn't mean that this plan couldn't reduce it. So the basic gist to answer choice B is that, okay, CO2 might rise, but this plan could still lower CO2. Kind of a weird concept to get used to if you're not used to it, right? But just because CO2 is rising overall doesn't mean that this plan couldn't lower it. Meanwhile, answer choice E, perfect, doesn't prove anything again, but it says that, oh, well, if I mine and powder this rock that I want to use, and what does it use? Fossil fuels. So that leads to the possibility that CO2 could increase. Because it opens up the door, like I said, it doesn't prove anything, but it opens up the door to the idea that even as I'm draining CO2 from the atmosphere with the rock, if I'm pumping out more CO2, that's going to make me question that this plan will necessarily achieve this goal. Yeah, and when it says most serves to call into question, it's the call into question part that really matters here. That's how you know that this is a weaken. Because if I'm calling something into question, meaning that I'm doubting that the plan's going to achieve the goal, it qualifies as a weakened question. And they might not just say weaken, they'll say call into question, put into doubt, makes less likely, different phrases like that. And you have to be flexible in your thinking as far as the phrases. Good call. All right, any other questions before we move on to one more of these? All right, here we go. So let's do one more of these. And you notice here, they use the word undermine again in the question. So undermine, kind of a synonym for weaken. All right, let's see what we got. Good luck. Okay, let's come back and discuss this, right? Trying to get you used to the GMAT timeframe, right? You don't have to do it this quick right away, but kind of good ahead of time to know how quick you have to do these questions. And when we start the course, I'll encourage everybody to do questions untimed. But yeah, this is the kind of pace you'll want to get to by the end. Okay, so I got a good number of people responding, seem to be coalescing around the correct answer for the most part. But let's talk about it. Now, this is something a little bit different that you might not have seen before. And this is the idea of cause and effect, sometimes referred to as correlation causation. You've seen this before, right? Just because two phenomena are correlated, that they go together, doesn't mean that one actually causes the other. And you notice that the conclusion is kind of saying here, okay, the herbal supplement. So I can say HS for herbal supplement. And I'm saying that it causes a reduction, or I could say downward arrow, less joint inflammation. Okay, and what's the evidence? Okay, well, the evidence here, you notice that this is a causal relationship, but the only thing I actually know is that the two are correlated, they go together, right? So we did this study, we collected the data from people using the herbal supplement, and the incidence of joint inflammation in those people were around the same as the incidence of people who use the herb devil's claw. Okay, in research that showed devil's claw to be effective. All right, so incidence, same with our supplement as with devil's claw. Okay, yeah, and you have to take off, no worry. And hold on, I do want to give some information on, what to do from here as far as getting to the course, like signing up for the course, but I'll do that in a second. Now, if I know that these two things go together, the problem is I don't know that one thing causes the other. I don't know that this herbal supplement actually does lead to a reduction in joint inflammation. So what I want to do as a weekend question is something that makes me question that. Could there be a potential alternate cause or an alternate explanation as to why all these people in this study with the herbal supplement experienced a decrease in joint inflammation? And the answer choices we seem to be set on if I'm looking over what you guys chose. So I got some love for B, I got some love for D, and I got some love for E. Now, because of the lack of time here, we'll kind of have to wrap up, but I'll kind of go over each one of these in detail. So answer choice B, again, that falls into the category of the better plan. Okay, just because there's a better plan, right? It seems to say that, reducing sugar and getting sufficient sleep, that's more important. But again, even if that's true, this herbal supplement might still actually reduce the joint inflammation. I don't care whether there's a better plan or not. I just want to know if this particular plan, this herbal supplement, is going to actually reduce the joint inflammation. And B doesn't tell me that. Doesn't give me an indication that I'm going to weaken that. Okay, answer choice E. The studies demonstrating the effectiveness of devil's claw were concluded over a period of years and involved many participants. Okay, well, do we have a sense of the same kind of deal, like how long the study was conducted and how many participants for the herbal supplement? Not a trick question. We don't have information on that, as Silmark says, right? It's tempting to think that after reading answer choice E, oh, it must have been that this study we're talking about had fewer participants and it was conducted over a smaller amount of time, but I don't know that for sure. I got to be very careful about what I fill in on my own. And that just leaves us with the correct answer, which is D. Now, if I find out that almost everybody using herbal supplements actually uses devil's claw, well, wait a minute. Then how do I know that the herbal supplement that I'm talking about actually affected any change, a reduction in joint inflammation? I already know that there's a study out there that showed devil's claw was effective. Well, this tells me that almost everyone is using something else that's effective. The alternate explanation we're going for here, right? That weakens the idea. Again, it doesn't disprove anything. This herbal supplement might still be effective, but if I know that they're all taking something else that's effective, that makes me question that it necessarily has to be this herbal supplement. And that's a wrap. Good. So, logistics. All right. Yeah, this one was a little bit more difficult. I'd say more on the line of a medium level question. So, I wanted to let you guys know about the course from here. I look forward to hopefully seeing some of you next week. Starts on Monday. And I did have some information here. I think I'm just going to put it into the chat so you guys can see it here. So the basic gist here is that you get free access to the TTP platform. all the questions, all the quizzes, all the lessons and stuff. That's a $699 value, and you get free access to it as part of the course. And I put the links up there in the chat for how to get to the LiveTeach classes. You can read more about me, about the class, when it's going to be, and also sign up on the online classes link. All right, so that's my sales pitch there, the salesperson part of everything. Great deal, can't pass it up. But I look forward to seeing you guys in class because I love to teach these classes. I've been doing this for quite a while, 16 years, as a matter of fact. Love the GMAT. And if you guys have any other questions before we wrap up for today, I'm happy to answer them. And hopefully I will see some of you on Monday. All right, take care. Have a great day and a great weekend.